Over the past few years, I've managed to get abroad to ride roller coasters in several different countries. In 2023, we had a mega trip to Orlando. 2024 was Spain, covering the parks in Madrid and Salou. Then 2025 was a short trip to the Netherlands and Germany. And to be very honest, I've totally got the bug. It's like there's a little roller coaster worm that has infected my brain and is constantly whispering for me to go and spend all my money on more trips for roller coasters. It doesn't help that our UK parks are kind of mid. All of these parks abroad really put us to shame with their theming and coasters and food and operations and actually caring about the parks and their guests. Luckily for me, there are so many more incredible parks to explore for the first time, and honestly nothing is like that first day in a brand new theme park. And you can only have that first day once, and that makes it special. So let's count down my top bucket list parks around the world. If you find yourself at any point enjoying the video, you should definitely subscribe. I promise you my videos are only going to get better. Now, my list is basically ranked by how much fun I would have being at that park for a day. If you told me I could teleport to any park and do a day there, this is pretty much the order I'd ask you to take me to them. As much as I am a coaster enthusiast, it's not just the coasters that factor into how I rank these parks. Dark rides, and to a lesser extent flat rides, also play a pretty big part. Theming plays a huge role. A park like Phantasialand, for example, would be nowhere near as special if it was just the coasters and rides with no theming. I want to be properly immersed in some sort of fun theme park land. Operations is also another huge one. I don't know what it is, but rides being poorly operated just makes me so irrationally angry, and therefore that impacts my enjoyment of the day, even if I'm not actually queuing for that long. The opposite is also the case. A park like Islands of Adventure that has its 3 main coasters all being operated to insane capacities pleases me so much. It just tickles that little coaster monkey part of my brain. Food and nature and all-round vibes all play into it as well. So basically there's a whole load of things, but even with that being said, coasters are the top factor, so expect to see some pretty big hitters at the top of this list. I've made a list of 20 here, but I can't be asked to do them all, and then the video would be too long anyway. So let's just rattle through some as honourable mentions, and then we'll get properly started once things get juicy. Wallaby Holland, Wallaby Belgium, and Plopsaland Belgium are all honourable mentions, partially because I should be ticking them all off very shortly later this year, but mainly because the other parks are just better. Do not get me wrong, I'm absolutely shitting myself with excitement to ride Conda, Untamed, and Ride to Happiness. These are all amazing bucket list coasters for sure, but the rest of the park and coastal lineups fall just below what we've got coming up later. I've got Holiday World as an honourable mention, specifically Holiday World at Hollywood Nights. This is an event the park runs in May where they stay open late into the night, they provide food and drinks, they do walk back to the coaster's ride area, and most importantly, trimless night rides on the voyage. The way those who have experienced Trimless Voyage talk about it, it might as well be Alan Schilke's firstborn child. And to be fair to them, it does look absolutely elite. It's not just how incredible the ride is, but also the vibe. People cheering, clapping, nerding out about the coasters, the ride-ups going as fast as they can to continually send trains. Tickets are rarer than deodorant at an enthusiast event, but one day I will get to Hollywood Nights. Lastly for honourable mentions is Carowinds, and that's pretty much purely for Fury 325. Copperhead Striker and Thunder Striker also do look brilliant, but if there's one coaster I want to marathon, it's Fury 325. This is the coaster with the tallest lift hill anywhere in the world, 9 consecutive Golden Ticket Awards for Best Steer Roller Coaster, a smooth, fast, long ride experience that looks exhilarating but re-rideable. Get me on it. Still, not quite enough for the park to break into the list though, and that's because at 15th place I have Nagashima Spa-Land in Japan. Nagashima Spa-Land is in many ways very similar to Carowinds, quite an extensive coaster count but bloated by some mid-tier coasters. However, what's not mid-tier is Hyuga. This striking RMC replaced the Intamin Woody White Cyclone in an incredible glow-up, providing the park with a world-class elite coaster that enthusiasts around the world journey to. Often ranked as one of the best RMC iBox coasters, which is already a well-loved coaster type, surely this one has to be something special. Steel Dragon 2000, formerly the world's longest coaster, is a huge 318-foot tall Morgan Giga, looking to be a slightly janky but speedy and fun ride. I think that any coaster that is older than me is allowed to be a little bit janky. They also have a clone of Manta from SeaWorld Orlando called Acrobat. I loved Manta when I rode it in 2023 and it's still in my top 15 coasters, so even though Acrobat isn't incorporated into the landscaping as well, I know I'd still enjoy it. The park as a whole does look a little worn out. It's definitely an amusement park, not a theme park. Still, a pretty lit coaster collection, and it takes 15th. At 14th is another Japanese park, it's fuji-Q Highland. Like its Japanese cousin, fuji-Q Highland has one standout coaster that is revered within the coaster community. If people journey to Hyuga, getting to Ijunaika is a pilgrimage. I'm not really sure why, but I'm obsessed with this thing. It might be because these 4D coasters are so rare and I've never done one. Maybe if I'd done X2 I'd be less hyped for Ijinaika, but as it is, I just feel the pull of its aura from the other side of the world. The track and stature just looks so menacing, and the ride experience itself looks wickedly disorientating, which I love. Fuji-Q has more than just Ijinaika. Fujiyama and Takabisha also look like fantastic coasters. I think out of the two I would probably prefer Takabisha, purely for that launch and unique layout. Though the only other Togo I've done is Big Apple Coaster, Fujiyama looks to be far more enjoyable. This lineup would have been even more elite with Dodonpa, the world's fastest accelerating coaster, which is now sadly closed. High G launches are probably my favourite element of any coaster, so I know I would have loved it. 0 to 118.8 miles an hour in 1.6 seconds is mental, and I'm so gutted it's now being demolished. It's impossible to mention Fuji-Q Highland without talking of course about Mount Fuji itself. If you get a clear day here, you can see the snowy peak of the mountain, and that has to be one of the coolest settings for a theme park ever, so points to the park for that. It's also impossible to mention Japanese theme parks without talking about their horrific ops. Partially due to culture and partially due to a string of accidents like the ones that closed Dodonpa and Ijinaika, the Japanese parks are extremely risk averse and will do everything in their power to prepare you for the ride. This means absolutely zero loose articles, which I totally agree with, but it's also insisting that all riders follow a stretching exercise before every ride, and then triple checking the restraints while also getting you to check the restraints, which results in dispatches approaching like 8 to 9 minutes. For all of Merlin's faults, at least their major coasters operate at a decent pace. On a good day you can find Hyperion dispatching every 90 to 100 seconds, with most of the other major coasters usually dispatching every 2 to 3 minutes. But here, at this world-class coaster, for every time it cycles you get an empty train sitting in a station, whilst everyone else is made to do silly stretches, all of which would genuinely impact my enjoyment of the park. I get that this is just the way they do things, and me raging is not going to change anything, but it's also my list so I can say whatever I want. From bad operations to bad operations, the park taking 13th place on my bucket list is Knott's Berry Farm in the USA. Though this park doesn't have a coaster of quite the same magnitude as the two previous Japanese ones, it ranks above them because it looks like a beautifully themed park with additional attractions that make it seem like a wonderful place to spend the day. As I already mentioned, their operations are infamously poor, mainly because of how they prioritise fast passes. If you haven't seen Face Ripped Off's video on Ghost Rider Ops, go check it out. But the TLDR is that Ghost Rider takes about 250 riders an hour from the main queue, which is absolutely whack. Speaking of Ghost Rider though, this is meant to be a phenomenal Woody. The layout looks elite with wicked head choppers and great pacing, and honestly, I think it's just the way Face Ripped Off glazes it so much, it makes me want to ride it so badly. Knott's has another wicked coaster in Accelerator, Stealth's big brother. If you watched any of my videos before, you know I'm a major Stealth fanboy. I've even said it already in this video, but a punchy launch gets me going more than any other element. Also, Accelerator has a sexy colour scheme. I mean, just look how beautiful she is. Silver Bullet and Hang Time are two other pretty fun coasters, and the rest of the park looks amazing. It has an authentic Americana feel, having developed organically over its 80-year history, which by the way makes it older than Milton Keynes. They have horse-drawn carriages, a railroad, rapids, a log flume and dark rides. The Calico Mine Ride in particular is spectacular, especially for a park that's now pretty tight on space. I really appreciate how they consistently choose to honour and represent their past through renovating and restoring their historic attractions. A little closer to home, in 12th place is Parc Asterix in France. I was so close to booking a trip here last year, but plans ended up falling through. However, I don't think it will be on my list much longer as it is so easy to get to on a quick trip from the UK. This park really has gone from strength to strength in the past 10 years, opening 3 coasters in Pegasus Express, Tout Tatis and C'est Automatique, with another Intamin multi-dimension coaster coming in 2028. That's an absolutely mad rate of expansion, especially when you consider Tout Tatis is one of the best coasters in the world, with a wonderfully whimsy Gaelic celebration theme. With my track record for Intamin multi-launches, I am positive that Tout Tatis will find its way into my top 5 whenever I do get to ride it. Osiris also looks to be one of the best of its models. To be honest, it looks to me like a smaller Montu, even right down to the theming, so if that's anything to go by, I'm sure it's class. Similarly to Knott's, the park just has a complete ride lineup with its wide range of attractions and a cohesive identity from its theming and landscaping, but also better operations. I love the Asterix and Obelix comics growing up, so being able to walk through a fully realised theme park themed to those stories will be incredible. Add on that Intamin multi-dimension coaster coming in 2028, which I know they're going to knock out park with the theming, and it's easily one of the best parks in Europe. 11th place is Energylandia in Poland. A European neighbour to Parc Asterix, but they kind of went in the opposite direction, focusing mainly on thrills and records to bring in guests, though they are also now making more of an effort to theme in their new areas. With the top 2 most parks can only dream of, Hyperion and Zadra are a pair of coasters that pretty much rival any other park globally. Hyperion is a 252 foot tall intimate mega coaster with a 269 foot drop. In my opinion, it looks better than most B&M hypers as it does something different with its layout. Starting with big airtime hills, but then throwing in an inversion, and then low to the ground fast-paced whippy transitions. And I think it just offers a much more dynamic and interesting experience. Named after one of Saturn's moons, this coaster is definitely out of this world. Zadra is an RMC Arbox coaster, often ranked even higher than Hakuge, bumping shoulders with Iron Gwazi and Steel Vengeance, which are the best of the best. 206 feet tall, with a layout focused on speed and whip, I think it would be impossible for me to not fall in love with this deep red dragon. Abyssus and Formula are two new-gen Vekoma launch coasters, both of which are said to be small but mighty, and as always, proper launches get me going. The vibe of the front half of the park is a little bit naff with rip-off IP and a bunch of flat rides and kiddie coasters just scattered about, but the back half and the quality of the big coasters more than makes up for it. Overall, a park that's a little top-heavy, but I can't wait one day to get cracking in Krakow. Getting into the top 10 now, I have such high expectations of all of these parks, and it's so close between them, but in 10th I have Canada's Wonderland, in Canada, surprisingly. This park would have been a few spots lower before 2025, but this past summer they opened up Alpen Fury, a bonkers premier launch coaster with 9 inversions. Watching the animated POV of this, I thought the layout looked a little bit repetitive with the inversions. However, after opening, the reviews started flooding in that this was Premier's crown jewel, and every element of the coaster delivered. The initial short launch that sends you diving into the mountain for the main launch, followed by the wild inverted top hat, is genuinely such a demented start to a coaster, I couldn't even think of that in my dreams. The rest of the layout is a range of inventive inversions with surprising airtime, all wrapped around the mountain and the park's other coasters. Big applause to Canada's Wonderland. Wear my boots, I'm going skiing. To be honest, it's another park that's a bit top heavy with rides like Flight Deck still hanging about, but its other top coasters are all bangers. Yukon Striker is the world's largest B&M dive coaster with an intimidating 245 foot vertical drop into a tunnel. Behemoth is a fun B&M hyper with a pretty mega layout. And then Leviathan, a B&M Giga at 306 feet with an insane 92 miles an hour top speed and a layout that really lets you feel that. This park tends to get rammed, and it's another one where fast passes are also pretty popular and prioritised heavily, which is a pain. But without cursing them too much for suffering from their own success, it looks like a well-landscaped, stunning park with so much to do that one day probably would nobody be near enough. At 9th is a pretty similar park, it's Kings Island in the USA. It was pretty close between Kings Island and Canada's Wonderland, but I put Kings Island higher as I think its coaster collection is just slightly better, even if they are pretty identical. Kings Island also have their own B&M Giga, Orion, a brilliant ride with awesome speed, but like Leviathan, too short for its stature. Then there's Diamondback, a B&M hyper with very similar stats to Behemoth, if a slightly better layout. Then you have another B&M model that's one of the biggest of its kind with Banshee, the giant B&M invert with 7 winding inversions. Both also have old arrow suspender coasters, which is another model I'm obsessed with and would love to ride. Kings Island doesn't have a good launch coaster, but they do have Mystic Timbers and the Beast, 2 wooden coasters with stellar reputations, with night rides on the latter being a sort of rite of passage or local legend at the park. Another reason Kings Island is higher is because I've only heard glowing reports about their operations and customer service. It seems that they're truly dedicated to making their guest experience better, which is silly to make such a big deal out of, but so many parks just don't deliver that. Kings Island to me looks like a joyous delight of a park to spend the day in, with its immaculate landscaping and positive vibes. Throw in a brilliant coaster lineup and it's a right royal rampage. Coming in as my 8th highest rated bucket list park is Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Though the coasters here aren't quite at the same level as the previous 2 entries, I have it at 8th because of the stunning setting and nature that surrounds the park. Plus, they have an intimate multi-launch which always helps. Busch Gardens Williamsburg is a wonderfully landscaped park, blanketed in trees and split by a winding river. Each area is themed to a European country, which may be a slightly overdone theme, but it works very well here. This means they can also pull from those countries' local myths and legends to create interesting theming and storylines for their attractions, like Loch Ness Monster or the Big Bad Wolf. The aforementioned intimate multi-launch coaster is Pantheon, probably the weakest coaster in terms of theming, but it has a pretty equivalent layout to Two Titties, which I've already gushed over enough. These intimate multi-launches are so comfortable to ride, always smooth, great forces, and the elements here look to follow that trend soundly. Alpengeist probably takes 2nd place at this park, a monstrous B&M invert, the tallest in the world actually, standing at a whopping 195 feet. I feel like that's absolutely bonkers for an invert when I'm used to ones like Inferno and Reborn. The drop, Immelman loop and Cobra roll all look crushingly forceful and an absolute treat to experience. The mid-course breaks do take quite a lot of steam out of the last portion of the ride, but the sheer size of that first part is unquestionable. You've got 2 more giant B&Ms with Griffin the Dive Coaster and Apollo's Chariot, the first ever B&M hyper. The latter's layout I'm sure would be fun, but it definitely does look like a prototype. The former is another coaster that mesmerises me. I think it's because of the weighty 10 across trains and huge track, combined with the light and airy colour scheme, give it such an immense presence. As I started by saying with this park, the setting is immaculate and that adds so much in my opinion. Just being able to sit and enjoy time in the park, even if you're not necessarily riding anything, that's when you know you're onto a winner. Operations are reported to be decent, nothing amazing, but a fair bit above the Tampa Park, not that that really is much praise. Add in a good log flume, a train ride, nice food options and flat rides, and it feels like a wonderfully complete all-round park. Taking another considerable step down in terms of coaster lineups, though it most definitely still deserves its place, at 7th is Efteling in the Netherlands. Baron 1898 and Joris in de Draak look to both be really fun coasters with impeccable world building and theming, but to be honest the park is about so much more than just coasters. It's about the whimsy, the magic, the immersion. Efteling is so hyper-focused on guest experience that everyone that goes there leaves touting it as a gold standard of theme park experiences. I recently saw on TikTok that they have teams running their coasters through the night in the winter to avoid them freezing and seizing up overnight, so that they are ready for guests first thing in the morning. Like, that is such an incredible demonstration of prioritising guest satisfaction above everything else. Like, our UK parks couldn't even comprehend that if you tried explaining it to them. Dark rides are this park's speciality, with Danse Macabre, Droomvlucht and Symbolica being the literal peak of their ride types. Danse Macabre is a new whole ride system developed by Intamin. To be honest, I have no idea what it does as I've avoided spoilers, but it's garnered very, very high praise. Droomvlucht is a dreamy suspended dark ride transporting you through rooms crammed with magical animatronics, really living up to its name of Dream Flight. Then Symbolica is a masterpiece of trackless dark ride design. A €35 million attraction with rooms filled to bursting with detail and theming. 3 alternate endings await you, giving it enormous re-rideability. You can't forget the fairy tale forest, where the park invites you to walk through the trees to discover traditional fairy tales depicted in animatronic form. A charming experience that takes up a considerable area for a small park, but one that adds so much to the magic of the park. If they added an Intamin multi-launch, I'm sure they'd shoot up my list, but even with a shallow coaster lineup, Efteling is a park worthy of high recognition. From probably the best themed park on this list to the worst, here only for its wicked coaster collection, in 6th it's Six Flags Magic Mountain in the USA. A previous record holder for the most coasters in one park, this park boasts 18 coasters, but unlike Energylandia, a majority of them are actually worth a ride. Starting off, you've got coasters like Apocalypse, Batman, Goliath and Scream, all decent rides in their own right, but they don't even come close to topping the list for what this park offers. We've already mentioned it in this video, so I'll start with it. X2, another 4D coaster. This one is the original, but some still do prefer it over Egenica. Just like Egenica, X2 is wildly intense, disorientating and aggressive, but that's exactly what draws me to it. I just want to get thrown around by this big hunk of steel so bad, and I hope I'd enjoy it. I've already covered flying coasters in this video, but Tatsu takes that to another level. The orange and green track soaring far above the pathways of the park, before it sends you diving into a demented pretzel loop. I can definitely see this being one of my favourites. Twisted Colossus would be another expected favourite. Word on the street is that this crew hauls ass now, and you actually have a good chance of getting a duel on at least one half of the ride. The elements, even without dueling, look really fun, but inverting over another train full of riders just adds so much to the ride. Full Throttle, Wonder Woman and West Coast Races all also look like genuinely brilliant rides, but there are just too many coasters here to go into each one in detail. And that's also even without considering the park's new coaster coming for 2027, the first of a Coma Thrill Glider. The setting of the park is decent, up on a hill with a couple of nice views, but a lot of the park lives up to the Six Flags names, and I haven't heard anyone raving about the customer service or operations. In fact, it's usually the opposite. However, with a park with such a stacked lineup, one day I'll have to get there. Bringing back the theming, here's a park I think I could genuinely live in. Cracking our top 5, it's Dollywood in the USA. Dollywood seems to check every box for what makes a top tier theme park. Rides, food, operations, setting, theming, immersion, guest experience, it's all done pretty much to perfection. A high quality lineup of 10 coasters awaits you across the park, from really well done family coasters like Fire Chaser Express and Dragonflyer, to the big dogs like Thunderhead and Lightning Rod. Now the rod has been neutered with its launch lift hill being removed in favour for a more reliable chain lift, but I know I'd still be laughing and giggling all the way through that quad down. Thunderhead seems to be a tremendously underrated woody, but it being a GTI with similar stats to Troy, I have complete faith that it'll be rambunctious and powerful. Big Bear Mountain has had words like best family coaster thrown around about it, so it must be legit. A super long, super smooth, winding layout with fun pops of airtime as you run from the bear that's chasing you through the on-ride audio. Wild Eagle and Tennessee Tornado are both excellent loopers. I always love a wing coaster, and Tennessee Tornado being Arrow's last mega looper makes me excited to experience a bit of theme park history. There's amazing theming all around the park, but also inside the rides themselves. Blazing Fury is a great example. I'm not really sure what it does inside, but the theming does look great. Daredevil Falls and Smoky Mountain River Rampage also follow that trend and are some of the best of their ride types. A good selection of flat rides and other Dolly Parton themed experiences round out the park's complete offering. Another huge point about Dollywood is the food. They have food festivals throughout the year with different themed stalls and food offerings. From what I've seen in videos, they all look delicious, and I'm hungry right now just thinking about it. Can't forget to mention the famous cinnamon bread, which I'm for sure getting a whole one just to myself when I get to this park. All around, amazing rides, setting and quality just create an incredible atmosphere. All of these factors continue into our number 4 spot, and that's because it's Dollywood's sister park, Silver Dollar City. Everything that's been said about Dollywood in terms of food, customer service and attention to detail can be transferred over to Silver Dollar City without a doubt. Run to perfection, these two parks are the jewels in Herschen's crown. The food here also looks undeniably scrumptious, with a whole host of different options across the park, including that famous cinnamon bread. When I said I could live in Dollywood, I think I could spend the rest of my life here because the park itself is actually alive. They have genuine craftspeople demonstrating and practicing their crafts in front of guests, from glass blowing and carpentry to leatherwork and pottery. These intimate and authentic experiences are just dotted around the park for you to stumble on. The whole setting of the park is a leafy, quiet, nature-filled plot nestled into the hills just outside Branson. It feels like another world or another time. The main non-ride attraction has to be the Marble Cave, a great natural wonder open as a tourist attraction since 1894, from which the rest of the theme park was actually built around. The history and natural beauty of the area has been central to the park and the owner's ethos since day one, and the park is a wonderful demonstration of that. I haven't even got to the rides yet. Outlaw Run is probably the park's marquee ride, an RMC Woody with a very unique layout, including a double Heartline roll to finish. You also have Time Traveller, a Max Spinner with a demented first drop. Think of this as Ride to Happiness's slightly less wild cousin, but still an elite coaster. Powder Keg is a launch coaster with an interesting history. Originally a premier water coaster, the launch and first section was added by S&S and then tied into the lift hill to create a long and very unusual layout. Wildfire is a pretty sizable B&M with probably the best setting of any B&M sit down. Those views across the forested hills are sublime. A great selection of other rides is also on offer. Water rides like Mystic River Falls, dark rides including the Flooded Mine, and flat rides like the Giant Barn Swing. All things considered, probably a touch below Dollywood in terms of coaster lineups, but overall an undeniably wondrous experience. We're getting into the top 3 now, and these parks' offerings are stacked. The best of the best. World-class coasters surrounded by other world-class coasters. Third place goes to Hershey Park in the USA. This park has an incredible lineup with 6 coasters that I think could break into my top 50. Starting from the good and going to the best, Great Bear is a B&M invert with wonky supports but an interesting layout with elements fairly unique for an invert. Candymonium, a B&M hyper that spans and twists around the park entrance, providing a perfect welcome to this thrill-focused park. Fahrenheit looks like a sleeper hit to me, a quintessentially noughties Intamin creation that has such a fun and different layout, including 6 inversions. Stormrunner, an Intamin hydraulic launch coaster, hell yeah. This could genuinely be my number 1 in the park with its aggressive first launch and 3 cracking inversions, 2 of which come in the Flying Snake Dive, which is an inversion found only on this ride. That's 2 Intamins from the noughties where Intamin were cooking hard, but hey, here comes another and they were still cooking in 2012 as well. Skyrush is also one of a kind in that it's not the only one of its ride model, but nothing like it has been created since. Borderline too intense for most park goers, this big yellow machine is a favourite within the community and kicks ass. A donkey kicking first drop, loads of tight turns and ejector hills, just non-stop from the tip of the lift to the brakes. Also, I gotta say that going from Stormrunner to Fahrenheit to Skyrush, Intamin to Intamin to Intamin, 3 coasters in a row, 2004, 2008 to 2012, is a wild run. One that I dream a UK park could have done. But no, we get to wait 12 years between major coasters at our parks. We're not done with the coasters though, because here comes Wildcat's Revenge, a straight up ripping RMC iBox coaster. Trains traverse the twisted layout with such fluid intensity. It looks to offer powerful forces, but with a smooth approach. I don't know, maybe I've just been recording this voiceover for too long, but it looks absolutely mega. I haven't even mentioned their other good rides like the GCI Dueling Woody Lightning Racer, or Comet, the PTC Woody still cooking from 1946, but there's just so much to do here. Food offerings are also decent, with the chocolate factory next door providing another fun dark ride experience, plus a free sample of tasteless waxy lumps that Americans try to pass off as chocolate. Overall, it looks like a nicely presented park. Not much attempt at theming, but clean with some well presented areas. Operations are also known to be decent, not the worst, but Candymonium is infamous for running 3 trains and triple stacking them every single time. It's a relentlessly busy park, but you've got to be fair to them, it's because they've created an awesome product that brings so much joy. Let's go top 2, just missing the top spot, it's another park from the USA, we have Cedar Point taking silver. If Hershey Park's lineup is elite, Cedar Point's is perfection. Without a doubt, it clears any other theme park in the world in terms of coaster lineup. Before we get into the coasters, let's cover off why it hasn't taken the number 1 spot, and that's mainly just due to the intention of the park, which is to be an amusement park, not a theme park. It has some sections like the Wild West area at the back that are done well, but large sections of the park are just paved with some light landscaping, like the main midway that leads into the park from the entrance. The setting is pretty spectacular in all honesty, a peninsula jutting out into Lake Erie. Like, who the hell saw that tiny bit of land and thought, you know what, I'm going to build the best amusement park in the whole world here. Absolutely crazy fellas, but I'm so glad they did. And to be fair, it would be a disservice to discount them and the park's history, which dates back to the 1870s, with bathhouses and dance halls, and in the first rides being added in 1892. Some of the buildings, like the historic Hotel Breakers, still stand from 1905 and evoke a sense of Americana which the rest of the park mirrors. Cedar Point gets very busy due to its short operating season, and though operations are good most of the time, the fast pass prioritisation screams corporate money making. I've already talked too much, so let's start the coaster rundown. I'll start by rattling off 4 B&Ms, which in any other park would be standouts, but here 4 more of a solid supporting cast. Rougarou, Valraven, Gatekeeper and Raptor, a flawless, a dive, a wing and an invert, a perfect demonstration of B&M's portfolio. All forceful and intimidating rides, each with a different gimmick. For the rest of the best, let's work from front to back. The first major coaster you'll reach is Siren's Curse, which went from being another park's reject to a standout coaster in a stacked lineup. This tilt coaster is modern Vekoma to a T, a jaw-dropping first element fit for most clickbait YouTube videos, followed by an expertly profiled, silky smooth series of inversions and turns. Millennium Force is next, the OG Giga Coaster from the best year, opening just a few hours after yours truly was born, and I'm so gutted that I missed out on being reincarnated into a big blue roller coaster. A speed-focused layout with some big airtime moments. Some love to hate it, but I think it'll be a mega ride experience. Looming over even Millie, next door is Top Thrill 2, the world's tallest coaster until just a few weeks ago. Whilst now an undeniably different experience from the original dragster, it's still an undeniably brilliant one, with a swing launch up a 400-foot tall spike and sustained speeds of over 100 miles an hour, ripping your face off. Just across the midway is Magnum XL200, another record breaker of its time. A bit polarising within the community, but supposedly still delivers bonkers airtime 37 years on. Finally, nestled in the back of the park is a top 2 that does rival and in fact beat Zadra and Hyperion. It's Maverick and Steel Vengeance. Now, I'm more of an Intamin cuck than an RMC fanboy, so I could end up preferring Maverick, but both of these coasters are world class, and I need to experience them as soon as possible. Maverick is a mastery in tight turns and whippy airtime, with a surprising second launch. Steel Vengeance is a mastery in maintaining momentum, sharp airtime, and interstructure diving. This is the best coaster lineup of all time and a pilgrimage I cannot wait to make. Many would have put CP at number 1, and I would genuinely understand that, but my number 1 goes to EP, Europa Park in Germany. While Cedar Point goes all in on the coasters, Europa Park has a slightly weaker but still great lineup and perfects pretty much everything else. Europa Park is like Efteling but 5 times the size. There is so much to do and see that I think I could spend a week there and still see new things the next time I went. Immaculately detailed lands themed to European countries are filled with thoughtfully designed attractions, authentic food options, and random nooks and paths to explore and get lost in. The park's designed in an hourglass shape with a web of paths that allow guests to discover the park from many different angles. A river runs alongside the park, and there are several lakes and ponds that house some water-based attractions. I think water adds so much to a park. Rivers and lakes are scientifically proven to be calming, and sometimes you just need to find a quiet space amongst the busyness of a park. Back in 2002, Mack didn't have the capability to make their own large thrill coaster, so they turned to B&M for a hyper. Silver Star is a majorly underrated ride. People often claim it's forceless, but I think that layout makes it impossible to be so I'm going to go in with an open mind. By 2009, they were ready to try their hand at making their own big thrill coaster, which resulted in Blue Fire. A slow launch into a pretty tight layout with 4 inversions, with the last being similar to the Mosasaurus roll, though I bet Max says they'd done it first. Just a few years after that, Woden was brought to the park, a very sizable 130 foot tall GCI Woody, probably a top 10 in the world. The layout looks class and it maintains its speed blazingly well. Tons of airtime and laterals, a total giggler for sure. Then, most recently, we have Voltron. This is Mac's most daring coaster, starting with a beyond vertical launch and a wicked series of 7 inversions, 2 more launch sections, a turntable swing launch, and major ejector airtime. Voltron looks intense as hell and I can't wait to ride it. I do admit that if it wasn't for Voltron, I think Europa would take second, but this Mack Striker is strikingly amazing and gives the park its much needed gold star coaster. It's not just the thrill rides that make it first class. Europa Park has so many dark rides of such a high quality. Piraten in Batavia looks to be even better than the source material. Arthur is a wondrous inverted coaster dark ride hybrid. Madame Freudenrich's Curiosities, Voletarium, there are so many to experience, there's no way you can do them all in 1 or even 2 days. And there are also so many more rides just scattered around, like the Crazy Taxi ride in England or the Liechtenstein balloon ride, which just offers something quick and fun to do and helps to disperse crowds while still being really well themed. It all goes back to guest experience. They know they are one of the best and they want every guest to leave with that impression. The fact that they advertise park hours as being open till at least a certain time, but often end up adding an extra half hour or an hour depending on how busy it is amazing. Or the fact that they rebuilt the whole Austrian area after it suffered fire damage, and the same with Piraten in Batavia. This is what it means to dedicate your park to the guest experience, and based on my criteria I set at the start of the video, that is why Europa Park is first. I just think it'll be such a fun time there, you don't need to stress about queues or crowds or poor food or bad operations. Everything you need to have an ace day at a theme park is there in bucketfuls. That's my top 15 bucket list parks. I really hope I get to tick off a few of them in the coming years. Let me know what your bucket list parks are in the comments, and if you've been to any of the parks I've mentioned, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the best and worst bits. Thank you so much for watching. You can really help a guy out by leaving a like or sharing the video with a friend. Subscribe if you've enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.